So we'll go through Nate's team really fast because we did see it earlier. It'll be the Armorage, Indeedee, Iron Hands, Annihilate, Mousehold, and Roaring Moon, which takes up so much space on the screen. But he'll be playing against Josh, who is playing an Iron Hands, Arcanine, Garganacl, Baxcalibur, Meowscarada, and Amoonguss. So that is just a regular Amoonguss. It is not Brute Bonnet.
Yeah, there are a couple Pokemon on Josh's team that make me think that it was probably at least partially inspired by the team that Maluka just won San Diego Regionals with. But yeah, there are some adaptations. Obviously, putting an Iron Hands onto a team probably isn't a bad thing. And then I believe Amoonguss is there. That's new as well. And then also there's a different Terra type on the Garganacl as well. So it's definitely different in function, but kind of maybe like similar. Maybe the inspiration is there or something like that. I know a couple people...
Blueprint was there.
Blueprint was there. And a couple people had pulled that team from ladder even before the regional. So it's possible that he was playing with it before now. But regardless, some familiar faces there, and of course, Nate was on stream already, so we've seen his team. He's got the Psychic Spam stuff, and then we saw Mousehold and Salamence be kind of like the crux of his game plan that he wasn't really quite able to pull off at any point, because he was just kind of constantly being hounded by like priority offense. But this time, it looks a little bit different. The team on Josh's side is a lot slower. So the potential for being able to get, something going with Dragonite might be a little bit easier.
With
Dragonite. You know what I meant.
Yeah, no worries. There's been a lot of
I got Dragonite on the brain.
To be fair, I will say there's a lot more Dragon types than ever expected to be running around in both versions of the format. It's really nice, especially when you've got something like Fairy type still like an actual typing in Pokemon, but you're saying, no, it's okay, I'm gonna bring in Dark types and Dragon types, and sometimes a combination of both. So Amoonguss and Meowscarada actually gonna hit the field here as Annihilate and Armor is gonna be the lead of choice here for Nate. So Meowscarada and Amoonguss is actually still just sort of a pain in the butt lead. When I remember facing it being like, man, I kind of hate everything about this.
Yeah, I think part of the thing that's really good about Amoonguss and to Annihilate specifically is that you can force it to like Final Gambit you. And it's unable to knock you out, so you are kind of fearing the double tap, but it does at least give Meowscarada space to like move around. And I believe this is also Sash Meowscarada, so leading with two Pokemon that can't be Final Gambited seems like, a pretty smart option to me.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you don't have to worry about, like, if you're Josh, you're like, hey, yeah, you can Final Gambit, you lose your Pokemon, I won't lose either of them, really. So, never really a terrible sort of idea, but Nate actually going to start us off here with the Terastallizing of that Armorage into the Grass-type Armorage.
Oh, wait, is he U-turning it?
That would be so great, because U-turn into either Pokemon would be kind of cool just to, like, have a
No, but you could U-turn the... Oh, it's Rage Power. Okay, so he can't. I thought he was going to, like, side U-turn and activate his weakness policy, but he can't. Okay, he is U-turning though.
he was U-turning, but Annihilate is going to go back to Nate, allowing him to at least choose something else to kind of bring out into the field. It's either going to be that Indeedee or that Roaring Moon that we are seeing right now here. Either one I think isn't terrible, because at least Indeedee sets up the terrain, so then you can, like, get the Expanding Force up to both. Well, really, the Amoonguss, more effectively, but then you also get like the boost here from your psychic seed. You can get Follow Me stuff here. Armor likes terrain a little bit better, at least in that instance as well. So I don't think it's terrible as a switch in.
I think it's okay, and you kind of like guarantee that you're going to knock out Amoonguss, but you could kind of see that he was sort of hovering over the dragon. The Roaring Moon slot, I almost did it again, because I think he was kind of fearful of it, potentially taking too much damage on the switch in, but ultimately it doesn't matter, and Amoonguss is just going to go away very, very quickly here. And this is a pretty good offensive position. Like, it doesn't really threaten Meowscarada all that much, because it's going to get the opportunity to be, like, knocking off pretty much everything before it has to take an Armor Cannon. And it's got a Focus Sash, but, like, being able to knock Amoonguss out on turn 1 is...
That always feels good.
Always feels nice.
Playing
that
against
Pokemon
it.
is really good.
And Iron Hands now is actually going to come into place here for that Amoonguss. Honestly, whenever I see an Amoonguss and it goes down within like the first turn, I'm just like, this feels right to me. But that's because just Amoonguss, like, if you're playing against it, I'm sure most of you know just how much of a pain it is to play against a Pokemon like that, especially if you allow to switch out and get that regenerator's health back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that Pokemon. But only when I have it, I guess, is the point that you're making. So there you go. But Armorage is going to make sure it's not taking a second knockoff here. And Indeedee is actually probably just going to get the opportunity to attack.
which is a wild thing to say, but indeed going for the Dazzling Gleam is able to break the sash on Meowscarada here as Iron Hands goes for the Drain Punch, so actually a double down into the Armory spot, which did protect itself this turn. So Indeedee, which very rarely is able to be an offensive Pokemon, is able to at least go for a little bit of damage here. Breaks the sash, more importantly, allowing Armarouge just sort of that freedom to go for a knockout on this turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the crux of the whole play, was that the sash needed to go away before Armarouge was free to start attacking again. So now, like, a Follow Me plus an Armor Cannon is a free knockout into Meowscarada. A Follow Me plus Expanding Force is a free knockout into the Iron Hands. So this is a really good time to be Armarouge, for sure. I think that probably the Meowscarada is the higher priority knockout here, so I think you go for that. And then depending on what's in the back, anything in the back might still take 1,000,000 damage anyway.
Oh, and actually Joshua going to be terrestrializing that Iron Hand. Is going to be a Steel type now here, which I think is more of just like a defensive Terra typing as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, but it's also just like a one-turn gambit. Like, okay, if you were getting Expanding Force this turn, then fine, you don't get knocked out, but now you just get knocked out by an Armor Cannon next turn.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and Armor Cannon right now from the Armarouge going to go into that Meowscarada spot, is going to pick up that knockout very easily. Again, thanks to that help from that Dazzling Gleam from Indeedee a turn earlier, is going to have to take down those stages of defense and special defense, but Indeedee following me here at least allows it to take this Drain Punch from the Iron Hands pretty nicely. The Iron Hands also just an Assault Vest variant, so not having like the booster energy like we've been seeing from a majority of the Iron Hands on stream so far.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like a pretty commanding position, I think, for Nate here, where we know Iron Hands tends not, well, we know for sure that it's not running Protect, and now that it has kind of like shown its Terra already, you just get to go for an Armor Cannon into that slot. You don't have to worry about messing around with will it, won't it. That was the last turn situation, and it didn't even, you know, kind of factor into Nate's game planning anyway. So you just get to probably clean up Iron Hands, maybe the Assault Vest one. Oh, no.
Yeah, after the Helping Hand, you know, Indeedee ready to cheer on that Armarouge here as Armor Cannon from that Armarouge going to go into this Steel type Iron Hands, now easily picking up that knockout here. Again, thanks to that help from Indeedee, and, you know, not having to worry about like your Pokemon, that opposing Pokemon clicking Protect here. So Iron Hands going to go down the turn, and so Arcanine, you know, great to usually have on the field, but against the rest of Nate's team, probably going to be in a little bit of a rough position. Snarl is going to hit both of these Pokemon, but you're still in a spot like where your Armarouge, you're sort of like, okay, that's fine. You still have like a full health Pokemon in the back. It's going to be that Roaring Moon as well. You actually still all have all four of your Pokemon. That Annihilate, you know, also still in a really good spot where it's not been hit at all. So
it can just Final Gambit, right?
Yeah, you just
you don't even need to mess around with attacks. You could just Final Gambit. But yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this variant of Armarouge is that it's faster because it can be weak armor, so that or it is weak armor, right? So that it gets to move before Arcanine here, which is relevant because it gets to attack before it gets snarled, making sure that it takes the knockout. So it's not really like, I think this is definitely the less common of the Armarouge abilities, where usually it's like Flash Fire, so you can be Terra Grass and still not weak to fire. But instead, it's the weak armor, and because it's so fast here, it gets to move before some of the things that, you know, it typically is not.
Can we just talk about how that Throat Chop there is there too against this Arcanine, right? So like, you know, you stop like those move-based things. And so I mean, Arcanine is still gonna go last. It was able to at least like hold on, but as you saw from that text, because of Throat Chop, it stops something like Snarl, which I think is like such a really fun interaction.
Very niche interaction. Yeah, that's for sure.
Great move to use. It's just, it's nice when it actually has a secondary effect that comes into play in like certain situations like this. So I mean, I think Nate just kind of had like the momentum from the beginning on that one, right?
Yeah,
like,
I think that's true.
You know, having like the Annihilate next to the Armarouge, it would have been super cool to see maybe like that side U-turn, but you know, the Follow Me maybe preventing something like that from happening. But honestly, I think your game plan there is just like, oh, if you knock out the Amoonguss, then you know you're in a great spot to just like not have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think that it was a really good, you know, I think the lead in theory, Amoonguss and Meowscarada into Annihilate, like especially if you're expecting it, like makes some sense. But depending on, like we saw in this turn one, with Nate going for the U-turn, that it's a little bit like you're not thinking enough ahead of what could potentially happen. Like, okay, so you position yourself to take a final gambit, but like there's no reason for him to actually do that if he sees the Amoonguss on the field. So I think something that you could maybe consider is like both of those Pokemon are the Pokemon that you want to like try and handle a final gambit Annihilate, but sometimes having them in the back is a little bit smarter, where if you like kind of know that it's coming, you can guess the slot and try and like catch the slot with your Sash or catch the slot with your Amoonguss. Is a little bit better than just kind of like straight up leading them, because you, just like we saw, he just goes for the U-turn. It sort of prevents all of those things from happening, and being able to U-turn, especially into a DD when you've got Armorage on the field, is like incredibly scary.
Yeah. And actually, it's looking like he's maybe deciding to change around a little bit, which
I think that's fine.
yeah, I really did kind of like love like the Armorage alongside like the other Pokemon that were there, right? And it feels like both sometimes like the Indeedee and the Mousehold, especially on this team, can kind of almost be substituted for each other, right? But the only big thing that Indeedee is bringing is sort of the ability to hit both Pokemon with Expanding Force, and even then sometimes you don't really need that because you're using Armor Cannon instead. But know for sure Nate adjusted a little bit. Time to see if Josh did too. And there's actually, yep, there's that Garganackle and a Amoonguss. So Garganackle, I know one of those Pokemon that sometimes people looked at, and then it wasn't until I think like last week that a lot more people sat up and paid attention to it.
Yeah, I think that's true. Is that it saw some early season success in Series 1, like right when the ladder first opened up, and then when people kind of realized that there were plenty of ways to handle it, and that I think especially the Iron Defense Body Press set kind of fell out of favor. But now that we're just kind of like going all in on Salt Cure, it kind of has like a new lease on life here. But it definitely is an interesting Pokemon, especially in this position here, where we know that it's Terra Flying, so it's never... it's not having to take like super effective moves at any point with this combination of Pokemon. If it doesn't want to, right, as it can just tear away the rock, so they can't get close combated. But we know that this Annihilate just like kind of has so many things that it can do. With the U-turn option, you could just go for a close combat. If you want to just damage trade Amoonguss, you could go for a final gambit. So I think that as far as flexibility goes, you kind of like Nate's position here, especially if you're catching Josh's Terra here on turn 1. Like, I think you would feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, and so Mousehold actually going to tag out with that Roaring Moon.
Yeah.
And Amoonguss going to show off that Water Terra typing here, so Josh going to use that really early on. Gargano actually going for Protect on this turn now, so that the Annihilate's final Gambit just going to knock into that Protect instead. So just honestly, all we're really seeing here is like one that Protect burn here. Amoonguss actually going for a Spore into that Mousehold, but that Safety Goggle is going to make sure that it doesn't get anything into its eyes to put it to sleep. So really a good switch in here from Nate as well. Like, unfortunate about the final Gambit for him, but at least able to get the Mousehold into the field and not have to worry about getting put to sleep. Yeah,
I think it's a pretty okay turn for both players, I think. But I think on turn 2 it favors Nate a little bit, especially because you kind of like baited out the Terra there for basically no reason. Like, if you had caught in Acrobatics and managed to put something to sleep, that's fine. But ultimately, it's just like you're kind of stuck with this defensive Terra typing on Amoonguss. And not that that's not what you want to be anyway, because it gets rid of a Flying and a Psychic weakness. But, you know, there might have been a potential better option. Like, now you can just close combat Garganackle. Even worse is it's just going to be protecting all game now. Yeah, thanks to the fact that Safety Goggles also negates the Rage Pattern, Mousehold just saw that and went, no, I don't really care about paying attention to you, and just is able to Encore the Garganackle. And now you can just Encore the Rage Powder and just like Dragon Dance all day. Like, so honestly, like, this Roaring Moon is about to get really scary if you're able to like just figure out like, hey, there's a lot of passiveness going on Josh's side now, thanks to that Encore, thanks to the potential Rage Powder. And actually Garganoff is just going to leave the field now. It's just like, you know what, that Protect, it's great because at least I'll get one turn now, but I need to be a little bit more like attack heavy here as Bax Caliber takes the field for that. Roaring Moon goes for that Dragon Dance on this turn. It is like, hey, I am here to just wreak havoc on you if necessary. And now Mousehold, again, going for that Encore, is going to lock that Amoonguss down into that Rage Powder. And Amoonguss just being like, well, this is unfortunate, and because it did not go for Rage Powder on this turn, we'll have to switch that move back into it. Yeah, I think the Bax Caliber is actually not a bad switch here, because you're always hitting Roaring Moon super effectively, regardless of whether or not it goes for the Terra Flying. Honestly, it's probably able to take a +1 attack as well, would be my guess. It's like super bulky, has a lot of defense. And it looks, I think like you could potentially just go for another Dragon Dance here, because I think with this sort of like, you could just follow me and Dragon Dance, and like you're not really afraid of anything that Baxcalibur wants to do. I think this one's loaded dice, so it's maybe threatening a knockout onto Mousehold, although it is pretty bulky, but I think you trade Mousehold for another Dragon Dance here.
Yeah, and so Amoonguss locked into that Rage Powder is going to have to click that one more time as Mousehold is also like, hey, I also would like to be the center of attention, but Dragon Dance here from Roarmoon is going to put it at +2 attack now and a +2 speed, so even scarier than before, as Icicle Spear from Baxcalibur is going to be the only actual attacking move
That'll
here.
get it if it's 5.
It will hit at least 3 times here. If it can hit 2 more, and there's the fourth one. And number 5 will, that's like, it is actually able to hold on some Mousehold, saying, hey, I still have it together. Amoonguss though is still kind of locked into Rage Powder, so you know for sure that like whatever move you're gonna hit is going to target down.
Yeah.
So that Baxcalibur is actually still kind of in a pretty decent spot, at least to try to get another, to at least maybe get a knockout here. Because if you knock out the Mousehold here, the next turn is also the scary one, because you could also just click Rage Powder forever. Right?
You could click Rage Powder forever, but I think you get to a point where you're a little scared of clicking Rage Powder forever because you're going to get knocked out eventually. But I think even if you lose Mousehold here, you have a lot of pressure onto the Baxcalibur the next turn, because you just get to attack Amoonguss again with Roaring Moon and then have like potentially Scarf Annihilate next to it, which will just knock out Baxcalibur with the close combat.
Yeah.
So this is like still fine, right? Because then this next turn is like a Throat Chop. Plus a close combat, and then you still have like this whole extra Pokemon that you're still working with as well. But that is, Baxcalibur is pretty scary.
And so Mousehold went down, but it did such a great job of doing what it needed to do, right? Like you were allowed Roaring Moon to set up, and now you're at +2 for attacking speed with this. The Amoonguss already ate its berry. Annihilate comes in here and is like, I'm ready. Like, that's just scary.
Yeah, I think just 2 attacks here, right? As you just throw Chop Amoonguss, and then you could either close combat, or you could just go, if you really want to, you could go for Final Gambit into the Baxcalibur slot. I feel like close combat probably knocks it out. But I'm also not really sure. I don't really know what kind of spreads the Scarf Annihilates run. And honestly, Baxcalibur is like always bulkier than I think it is, so I wouldn't be surprised for it to take a close combat here.
Alright, and so Amoonguss doesn't click Rage Powder despite the fact that it's uncoordinated. And that is rough here, as Icicle Spear is doing a lot of damage there, but not quite enough to pick up the knockout, as Amoonguss does go down this turn thanks to that Throat Chop. We saw it do a massive amount of damage that last turn, forcing Amoonguss to eat that Citrus Berry. And now Annihilate is, hey, I'm gonna Final Gambit you and I'll go down, but I'm gonna take, oh no, is not quite able to take that down. Is that Baxcalibur? No, it's not. Yeah, it's loaded dice too. So
it's alive.
That's the fact that it managed to hang on is kind of rough.
The fact that it managed to hang on means that depending on what Josh brings in here, could win the game. Actually, he might win the game, right? Because he still has 2 Pokemon left. Amoonguss was the first thing to be knocked out. He's got Garganacl in the back still.
Yeah, Garganacl, and then whatever.
Yeah, that's actually a big turn. I think that probably he was just a little iffy on what the close combat calc was. And in hindsight, like I think if you get to do it again, you probably just click close combat and see what happens. But I think it's also reasonable to expect that's a KO. But most of the Baxcalibur are like bulky at this point in the format, especially after last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that like Roaring Moon is gonna have to take another sort of Icicle Spear from that Baxcalibur. Sure, you can lose the Baxcalibur's turn, but then it'll just be Armor Rouge versus Garganacl and whatever else is in the back for Joshua, right? Sure, you still have your Terrasilize if you're Nate, but I still think like you're kind of in the back end now.
None of the Terrastal option like really does anything. Like they're all Ice Weak, right? So I mean, you just needed to knock out Baxcalibur last turn. It's just the reality of it.
And Baxcalibur actually going to go for Protect this turn on Josh's side. As Roaring Moon goes for the Throat Chop in the Garganacl, does a considerable amount of damage as well here, but doubling down into that Garganacl spot, for me, not enough to pick out the knockout still, though. Is able to get that Salt Cure into that Armor Rouge. It's going to do a lot of damage, but even more importantly, is going to do a lot of residual damage as the turn goes on here. Weak Armor is going to knock down the defense and up the speed here of that Armor Rouge, but it is still a really kind of rough up. The weakness policy also working here, I guess, for Nate, but honestly, I think you're still just kind of in a rough spot.
Well, I mean, I think you can see the thought process on both sides. As Nate was like, okay, I'm gonna predict him to predict my Protect, because obviously the obvious play from Baxcalibur here is an Ice Shard. and you can potentially lose the game if you drop Excalibur without it knocking out Roaring Moon, right? So now we're kind of like back to playing the same game we were last turn, which is where is the Protect going to be? Because now, I mean, I guess you don't have to. You could go for double Protect, but you want to be Ice Sharding into Roaring Moon, but now it's pretty much a free Protect for Nate if he wants to take that.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where like I'm really glad that we're sitting on this side of like the battle, because
this is
trying
when
to
it's
think,
fun.
yeah, this is the part trying to think about like what is your opponent gonna do now here, like because if you're like thinking like, oh, I'm gonna read the Protect here, but then should I just attack? And then it's just a constant sort of like whirlwind of like trying to think about this. But Roaring Moon is protecting this turn. No terrestrializing, as Ice Shard is going to go into that armor trigger. This is going to be rough here, as it is going to get another weak armor procs. Is going to be able to pick up a knockout here on that Max Color.
You give over a recover though.
Yeah, and then you're going to have Josh's last Pokemon show.
Yeah,
still,
so I guess it kind of depends on what that is, right?
Oh, well, Solid Care from Garganacl actually going to go into that Roaring Moon, which protected itself. Yeah, actually, I agree with you. That I think would have been a great turn to sort of go for a recover, because you're in such a scary spot right now here.
Maybe he didn't, because you're still getting knocked out by a +2 Throat Chop anyway. You need, what, another 2 turns of leftovers, probably. But yeah, that was a really crazy, like, potentially game-turning. Okay, but Meowscarada's here, and it has a Sash, but I think both of the 2 fastest Pokemon on the field are Nate's Pokemon right now, which is weird to say because it's an Armarouge and there's a Meowscarada over there. So this is...
Do you protect here with Meowscarada?
You could, yeah. I mean, if you double into a protect from Meowscarada, the game's pretty much over, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's rough because in Garganacl it's like.
But this is tricky. Yeah, this is tricky. Especially, I think this Meowscarada has Sucker Punch, so it might even just be able to like potentially seal it up that way as well. But definitely like not the last Pokemon that you wanted to see if you're Nate here.
Yeah, and I think that's why like Joshua like was keeping it in the back for so long, which is because it's like, oh hey, Meowscarada, like you have to double down into it in some of these ways. Armarouge going for a Protect on this turn here. If Meowscarada goes for that, excuse me, for that Sucker Punch here, no, actually goes for a Protect instead.
Okay.
Is going to make sure it doesn't get hit here. We did see that Roaring Moon went for that Throat Chop. Is going to pick up that knockout here on Garganacl. This is actually are both of them in a Sucker Punch range? Because after the Salt Cure, you're actually in the spot now. So here's the weird thing of like both of your Pokemon are able to you can switch off protecting stuff, right?
Yeah, so you can win if you call multiple things correctly, right? So if you catch an attack both turns with the Sucker Punch, well, actually, you know what? I don't know if that if the Roaring Moon is in Sucker Punch range, so that might just be enough.
This is
for Nate to win, because I think you just attack twice here, right? And then if you're not in Sucker Punch range, then you just get to attack twice with the Roaring Moon. I think that's it, right? I think that's it.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a double protected in the Armarouge,
because you can
knocked out.
Because you can Sucker Punch Armarouge this turn, and then protect next turn, and it gets knocked out either way.
Yeah,
so there's no Sucker Punch.
Yeah, and I mean, sir, you get the Sash.
Yeah,
still,
so
but
he's going.
He
just had to go for the attack onto the Roaring Moon. Yeah.
Because I mean, wait,
really
so then. What if you get if you get a double protected Meowscarada, maybe you get a chance because an Armarouge gets knocked out from Salt Cure.
I think it was 2 more turns, so you have to attack this turn either way.
That's still rough.
Yeah, so I think you probably just needed some way to like I don't think the Roaring Moon was in Sucker Punch range, so I think what you could have done, right, is you go for the Sucker Punch onto the Armarouge, you take 1 knockout. Or you can go for a double protect like 2 turns later. So if you think 2 Sucker Punches is going to knock out the Roaring Moon, then you Sucker Punch, you protect, and then you Sucker Punch it again.
It's just rough too, because I think that turn with the Garganacl, like if you had been able to call like the protect there and then the recover, then you're still kind of like forcing but.
Yeah, again, I don't know if recover really gets you out because of how much damage that Throat Chop does, but it's like definitely an out where maybe like
Meowscarada is able to at least
recover
it.
plus a protect, and maybe then you're in range where you can get the Salt Cure down onto
the Armarouge. Okay.
Yeah. So,
it's
there were some
tough endgame.
There were some endgames, and it was definitely up in the air. And I honestly thought that it was pretty Josh favored for like most of the mid to late game there, but Nate did a really good job of pulling it out towards the end there.
Honestly, like that was one of those like, oh, there's like so many different pathways you can take in either one of those, and at that point you're just like, that's just super unfortunate. So we're waiting for I think 1 or 2 more top cut matches to finish up, but in the meantime, we'll see you guys for your top 4 and then finals. So once again, just as a heads up, first place for these events, so long as like CP is not offered, right now first place gets $50, second place
80.
$50, yeah, second place gets 40, and third place gets $30. So still not a bad day for playing Pokemon if you're in top cut, as long as you can place there. As always, though, thank you to Psycho Play and POW Gaming for having us. It's been it's really nice to just have like again a place to just play almost every other week for VGC events. It's been really nice practice, and I've had 2 great co-casters like in a row from like out of like places that I don't normally see. So I know that I was gonna say from out of state, but you're literally in San Diego.
I mean, yeah.
It's been nice. It's been the guests have been very entertaining. So